Wow, here we are.
Say it to the official. I make sure.
Oh, it's fine. There's nobody in there.
We get this done. We'll get that.
Well, there's no effect, you're right.
Okay. You're good.
Okay, good morning and welcome to the Maryland Food Center Authority's December 1, 2022 meeting. It's 5 minutes after 9 and we're ready to start. First of all, thank you everybody that's here in person. Appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to be here. We have a full motion, we have a full complement on the agenda today and a lot to accomplish. So I think we should be able to move through it efficiently. With that said, I need an approval of the minutes from the September 15th meeting. Your motion to accept with a second, please.
We're going to approve the minutes on September 15th as presented.
We need a second, please. Second, thank you. When? Any discussion about the minutes, changes? Okay, go to vote. All those in favor of accepting the minutes of September 15th, 2022, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? The ayes carry, the minutes are approved. Our next order on the agenda is the Maryland Food Center Authority update. I turn over to our director, Don, for the comment.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to bring the board and make the board aware that I did reach out, tried to reach out to create the property owner with the former property known as Crazy Rays, and wasn't able to find anybody that could really talk to me about the property. And so I went to Howard County Economic Development Authority, and the CEO of that authority is trying to do the same thing. Told him we would be interested in learning what they're planning to do with the property for their seller or whatever. So he said he'd let me know once they were able to find a contact person who could actually talk about it. And then the other thing is the produce market expansion. The engineers are now working with the architect and building the layout for looking at what electrical runs are going to have to be done, any structural work that's going to have to be done in order to support the expansion. So right now we're looking at somewhere around an April start date on the work. So we're looking to
Not for bidding, going out for bidding.
no, we want to go out for bid probably February.
Oh.
Yeah, and then we want to have the work start by May, April, May, and so that's where we're at there. They're almost done with the schematics, and then they work with they provide the schematics to the engineers, and then they take the schematics and they work out what kind of electrical runs are going to have to be done down at the market to meet the refrigeration requirements, etc. So that's all I have as updates. And Angela?
Okay, can we back up and look at some of the minutes that we worked, you talked about last time, the roof work?
Yes, the roof work is,
Update that.
And any other problems with the proverbial that you didn't smell the last time?
yeah, I mean, they're still working through and getting the plant running.
But nothing we need to be made aware of.
Thank you, Don. I'm going to start today with going over the results of our annual tenant survey. This is the customer satisfaction survey that we do each year. We send it out to the tenants electronically. Some of them don't do that, so we also send it out in PDF form. And then once we get back the results, I tabulate everything, and then together, operations, accounting, we all get together. We go over in detail the tenant surveys to figure out what can we do differently to increase tenant satisfaction. When we did this survey last year and we had this meeting, I told you I never wanted to do the tenant survey ever again because the results were so incredible. Now, keep in mind, at that time, we had just told the tenants, literally right then, no CPI increases on your rent, yay. We're also going to pick up your service expense reimbursement deficit that they would have had to repay to us, but as a COVID assistance benefit that we're giving to the tenants, we picked that up for them. So yeah, So all excellence, everything last year was excellent. So then this year, 4% rent increase. There was a service expense reimbursement deficit at the produce market that they're repaying us over a 10-month period of time. And so what I believe is that we really did get real answers this time, but they're still really good. They're not excellent in every single category like they were last time, but they are really, really good. The things that we're looking at when we go over the tenant survey is the market management overall, how we handle market repairs. Are they satisfied with the maintenance workers? Are they satisfied with the security workers? And are they satisfied with the sanitation of the market? So it's the same questions that we ask each year so that we're able to gauge how we're doing year to year. And then also what we're able to do, because we do ask another question, yes, did we address all of the issues that you let us know last year? So that's a really important one to us, and that's why we get together. That's why we formulate these plans, and we do work closely with the tenants after we get the results of the tenant survey. So over at the Maryland Market Center, as I mentioned, everything was excellent last year, but this year we were able to identify 2 areas that went from excellent to moderately satisfied. So still really good, but not excellent. And what was also great in working with the tenants, we were able to identify exactly why these 2 things went from excellent to moderately satisfied. So for the market repairs are handled promptly by market management. What we discovered is that the tenants were unhappy with the fact that the roof was leaking, and that was causing their ceiling tiles to be damaged. We did not want to go in and keep replacing the ceiling tiles throughout the time while the roof is being replaced. So we said we would just do it once the project is finished, and we're at the final stages of the roof project. December 14th, somewhere around there is our final walkthrough. Then we'll be doing punch list items. So we're very, very close to that. So once we finish the project, we're going to go back into the Maryland Market Center and replace any of the ceiling tiles that are damaged. So just by talking to the tenants, we were able to identify that that's what was upsetting them. And then the other one that went down was for the work performed by the maintenance employees. And we were able to identify that that was because they weren't satisfied with the way that we were cleaning the dock. And we already knew this. We already understood this to be an issue. In 2021, we put into the budget to get a new scrubber, and we ordered that scrubber in March 2022, and it's scheduled for delivery in February 2023. So it takes a full year for us to get that scrubber. So we know that it is an issue. And so when we talked to the tenants, we said, please bear with us. We're doing the best that we can. And then another issue that came up that relates to the dock is because that market at the Maryland Market Center, it used to be the seafood market. So the way that we clean that dock has always been based on the schedules of seafood companies, because seafood companies have different schedules than produce companies. Seafood companies work early. I almost say they work late because it is so early that they work in the morning. So they're done earlier than the produce companies are. So when we were going down to do the docks when it was clear for seafood, but not necessarily clear for produce. So Gary and Martin met and they came up with a new schedule that can accommodate the produce tenants so that their docks are clear when we go down to do the cleaning. So we have definitely made changes, and we're hoping to see next year that these 2 items will go back up to being excellent. But again, it's very good, but it's not excellent like it was last year. And then over at the produce market, same scenario, everything was excellent last year. There was one area that came down this year, and that was in the overall security of the market. And what we were able to identify is that that has to do with the entrance gate at the produce market. We have, when you go into the produce market, there are 3 lanes that you can access. The one farthest to the right is where the security guard is, and this is where trucks come in and they pay their entrance fees. The middle lane is where employees or our MFCA employees, we use that with a card so that we don't have to wait in that long line of the tractor trailers swiping their credit cards to come into the market. And then the 3rd lane is the exit. For a period of time, the software has had an issue in that middle lane. And so that while the gate arm has been down, all you had to do was drive up and it would go up, and then you can come into the market. So that software issue has been corrected, and we are currently working with the tenants because we want to make sure that once we have the system back up and running, that we aren't allowing access to people who are no longer employees at their businesses. And so that is a top priority for us, and we're getting that resolved. I also wanted to say that as we go through all of these issues with the tenants and we assign the different things to do, I wanted to just give you some feedback that we received from a tenant. They had about 5 issues that we were able to work through. They were all very different, but we were able to work through all of them. So I just wanted to share with you after they got the information back from us. It said, "Dear Angela, on behalf of their company name, thank you so much for reading the surveys thoroughly and taking the appropriate steps to solve our concerns. It means a lot to us. So just know that there is this communication that we get afterward because you really do try hard to increase the tenant satisfaction down at the markets." So we don't need a motion when the tenants, also, we do report this information to the state on our Managing for Results annual report. And as has been the case every single year since we have done this tenant survey, it's probably 15, 17 years that we've been doing this. We have one dissatisfied tenant. He only answers a couple of questions on the tenant survey. They are always answered in the worst possible way. And he has been dissatisfied every year that we've ever done this survey. So I will tell you again, I can almost guarantee you we will have that same scenario next year. We will continue to have one dissatisfied tenant. And we do report that to the state that one is dissatisfied. So we don't need a motion for the tenant surveys. I just wanted to bring you up to date on that. The next thing that we need to move into are the financial statements, the operating budgets, and the capital improvement budget. And you don't need to do anything. I'm going to hand you. Yes. You got it.
So Angela, is this one dissatisfied guy? Does he pay his rent on time?
Yes, he
Okay,
does.
so we're not dissatisfied with him
And
or her.
he really wants the dock to be enclosed. So he's very miserable, but he really wants the dock to be enclosed. He doesn't like security, but he wants the dock to be. He doesn't like maintenance. Thank you, sir.
It's always like one.
Yeah.
So, does everyone have one? Okay, so first, I'd like to apologize for having to delay the meetings for 2 weeks. This was certainly not anything that we did. Everything that the auditors ever asked from us, they had immediately. When we were told when to give them the data, we were always on time. It's just been very challenging with these auditors. Our financial statements were due September 30th. We got them on Monday. So they're almost 2 months late providing us financial statements, which of course, as I was explaining to Steve, we're just a cog in the wheel of the state. And so the state is waiting on us in order to roll up their financial statement. So as soon as we finish this meeting and hopefully we approve, then I'll be able to upload everything into their system so that they can continue to work. So sorry that we're late. We do operate currently under the statewide contract that the rest of the state uses for auditing services. We have to go back to maybe like 8 years prior when we used to have our own auditing service. But then I found out that there was a statewide contract and we could save money. I love to save money. So we, because of the fact that all of the state agencies are in there, you're taking advantage of the economies of scale. But at the same time, if they don't provide financial statements on time, I would go into my own pocket to give them the difference in the contract so that we could get our financial statements. So we are leaving that contract. We are going to go out for bid for our own auditors in the spring. And of course, we'll come back to the board and we'll involve you in that process. Everyone should receive a FedEx package. If you didn't, let me know because I have extra copies. And in that FedEx package includes a tremendous amount of financial data. And so what I did this year is the same thing that I've done in prior years is I take all of that information and I consolidate it down into just a few pages that tell the story of where we've been, where we are today, where we're going. And so it makes sense instead of trying to flip through 3 different books. And before we dive into page 1, I want to make sure that, and I'm going to do my best to explain this, but there's a new accounting pronouncement that came out from the governmental accounting standards. It's called GASB 87. It went into effect for the financial statements that we just completed. And it affects leases. And I understand what the GASB was trying to do with this pronouncement. However, they, in my opinion, did not mean for this pronouncement to affect agencies such as us. What I think this pronouncement was intended to do was to give the user of a financial statement additional information if a state agency leases an office copier from somewhere. If a state agency leases a vehicle from somewhere, they were not considering that there may be a state agency out there that derives almost 100% of their revenue from leases. And because of this new pronouncement, it has dramatically affected the way that we report revenue on our financial statement. So we'll get into more deeply into that as we go through the process. The example that I'd like to use for you to try to explain how we do the leases now is the most dramatic one, and it is a 75-year lease that we have now. And what the statute is making us do is that they're not really considered leases anymore, they're considered financial instruments. So in order for us to figure out how much rent can we record in our financial statements now, what we have to do is we have to determine how much each year, based on the lease, how much each year are we expecting to collect over the life of the lease? So if you have a 75-year lease, a lot. In this particular example, it's worth $50 million over 75 years. So in order to figure out how much rent, just rent, how much rent are we allowed to record, we have to take the present value of all of those payments over the 75 years. And once we have that number, which is about $10 million, you divide that by how many years are left in the lease. That number is how much you can record as rent every single year for 75 years. That number comes out to be about $150,000. So each year, regardless of how much we collect, the amount of rent that we can record on our financial statements for that lease is $150,000, whether it's today or it's the year 2095, it doesn't matter. So then once you put that aside, we already know every single year, you can ask me any year, hey, I'm going to record on that lease $5,000 because it's the same every single year. What changes, because these are now financial instruments, is that once we have the net present value, then we create amortization schedules over those 75 years. So now we have an interest component that we've never had before. And if you have a 75-year lease, $50 million over 75 years, that amortization schedule is really happy at the beginning with interest. Really happy with interest. And then at the end, with interest. Because amortization schedules are front loaded with interest. So if we just look at that lease, the way that we used to do it, we would have looked at the lease and it would have said, you're going to collect $300,000 this year. We would have collected $300,000. We would have recorded $300,000 worth of revenue. Super simple, very logical. The way that it is now is we would get to record the $150,000, which is the same thing that we're going to do every single year, plus the interest component. And the interest component for the first year is $500,000. So on this lease in this year, we are recording $650,000 worth of rent and interest. We collected $300,000. That's it. So what we've done is we've now doubled the amount of rent we would have shown previously. Now fast forward to the year 2095. In that year, we're going to record $150,000 in rent and $50,000 worth of interest. So in a year that we're collecting $1 million in rent, we're only going to be allowed to show $200,000 in rent plus interest. And so believe me, I have made my objections very clear to the auditors and to the review committee about how this impacts us and how, to me, it feels like it's materially misstated. So they definitely know, but we must present our financial statements using these rules. The gold standard for an audit is to receive an unqualified opinion. If we deviate in any way from what I just described, we will then receive a qualified opinion, and that's death. So we have to do it the way that they're saying. In my discussions with the auditor, they have said that they're hopeful that because this is the first year, everybody's got to work out the kinks. They're hopeful that the GASB is going to come back out with some more pronouncements, especially for these long-term arrangements, to see what we can do differently, change the rules so that, because this isn't logical. I mean, I think anybody that looks at these numbers sees that this isn't logical. So we're hopeful as time goes on, but our hands are tied. So as we go through these financial statements, just know that we are subject to this lease statute that has never been there before. And so if this was last year, I'd say, oh, we got $300,000 in rent on that agreement. But now I'm telling you, we got $650,000. We did the real. I mean, real, it's not real. And then the other piece that came up this year is that because we were in for another lease, because we were able to check several boxes that have been the rules, One of them being it had the buyout clause that we reasonably expect to be exercised. We have to then assume today that sale happened. Sale hasn't happened. I reasonably assume it's gonna happen, it may not. I don't know, I'm not part of that company, but I'm reasonably certain it'll happen. So in the year 2040, in our lease agreement, we've already had approved what the purchase price is. We already know what the net book value is of the work that went into that property. So what we had to do in this year is we had to report a $2.7 million gain on a sale that hasn't happened. We have not received anything for it. We had to take it off of the asset had to come off of our books completely. And again, we had to do this. If we didn't do this, then we would get a qualified opinion. So as we look at the financial statements for the current year, our net income, as shown on the financial statement, is $4 million. And it's hard for me to not just giggle when I tell you that, because that number is not real. And I'm going to get into, because I like to be able to tell if we're doing a good job, management's making good decisions. I did come up with a way to show those numbers, and we'll get to that in a bit. But just know, if you open up our financial statements today, you're going to see that we had net income of $4 million. Of that, 3.3 million isn't real, if you will. Yes.
Two questions come to mind. One is the raw ground. We have no improvements on this because in this scenario, they're ground leases.
They are, but we had site improvements.
Okay. What about, I know it's not important to us because we don't pay taxes, but depreciation of all of this, is that part of what they're doing? Is that, I mean, we don't handle depreciation in any way?
Are we talking about the sale?
Well, you're gonna have to recapture on your sale, but no, the depreciation, if we had buildings per se, is that what they were after? Is if a depreciation on the building, we have ground, so there's no depreciation.
Well, there's depreciation of the improvements.
Right.
And
How does
so
that come into play?
well, it depends if it's the lease that has not been considered to be sold. The lease that's
Okay.
considered to be sold is gone. There is no depreciation. The net book value is what is used to determine what the gain is. So it's completely eliminated from the book in its entirety. All the other properties are taking depreciation in the same way that they would have previously.
Angela. How do you come up with the rate of return for the net present value to get from 50 million to 10 million?
I will, I've used T-value and I'll have you show it to you. And thankfully, because I've got hundreds of hours into this, because I did all of the calculations this year manually. We have procured software that will do it for us going forward. And so we just finished the implementation of that. And of course, we'll be able to confirm. Right. Sorry. So it's going to be very different going forward as far as time commitment. That's for sure. Yes. But I'm happy to show you how it works. And even if you'd like to have access to our new visual lease software, we can certainly give you a login too if you've ever like to get in there, see how any of it works. Sure. This is pretty cool. I mean, we have the same background. We both went to the real estate program at Johns Hopkins, so we have very similar backgrounds. He would look at this the same way as me that I would look at this and go, ooh. So I'm more than happy to share that.
I know.
That is what we were talking about, you have it or you don't make it. Okay, so coming into the first page of the document, this is going to show you in the first column the results of our financial audit from fiscal year 22, which ended 6/30/2022. The middle column is going to show you what our estimated net income would be for fiscal year 23 based on the operating budget that we're going to look at, based on the capital improvement budget that we're going to look at, and based on the revenue that we anticipate being able to report. And then as fiscal year 24 is going to show us for the year that ends June 30th, 2024. So the first thing I'd like to look at that I have highlighted are the purple lines. And you can see it says produce, market, lease interest, and MFCA lease interest revenue. These are brand new accounts, brand new line items. And these are only here because of this GAP 87. This is that portion that I talked to you about that we write off of the amortization schedules. And so as you can see, as you go across, it goes down, actual to the estimated, to the next estimated, you see it's going down 18%, and then the other one's going down by 20%. And the reason why it's doing that is because just think of the nature of an amortization schedule. As we go deeper into the amortization schedule, this number is going to go down. So what we need to do to counteract this going forward is when we come to the board with a new lease, we're going to need to offer lots of different terms in there. We're going to need to have shorters and longers and really long ones so that we're able to try to blend these time periods so we don't have any really high versus really low, because all of these leases are ending at the same time. So they're going to fall at the same rate. So we've got to take that change going forward. Now, the other thing I want to show you that's just above the line, the purple line, is take a look at 23 for the produce market and then 24 for the produce market. It's the exact same number. And the reason why it's the exact same number is because of what I explained to you before. The amount of rent that we are allowed to record is the exact same every single year under the new statute. And then the next line I'll bring to your attention, it says future facility expansion chart bed. So this is the existing facility that we have down the road. And we just recently extended their lease for 12 months. That did go to the Board of Public Works and was approved to do the 12-month extension of the lease while we're working out this the development of this project. And so what I did over in fiscal year 23, I just want to talk through that a little bit. When we recently met with the tenant, we had a few things that we had to go over regarding this expansion. We had an issue with stormwater management and the square footage of the building. So as it turned out, we needed to reduce the square footage of the building. But it was also important for the tenant to understand that whatever numbers we come up with today are just estimates. And the reason why they're just estimates is we don't have even a cost estimate yet. We also don't know what rate of return we're expecting on this project, because we can only determine that at the time, which will be in the future, maybe in the spring at some point. But when I did this analysis, I did it based on a 7% return. So I just want to make sure it's clear that this is just an estimate. When we get to the point where we're doing actuals, that's going to come back to the board. Like I do every time, I'm going to have to spend. Why is it this number? Because the reason we have to defend it to you is because once we're done with you, then we have to go to the Board of Public Works, and that's a room full of really smart lawyers. And they pick apart every single clause that is in front of them. So I explained to the tenant a couple of things. Number one, and he understands and completely agrees, but he said he also understands that we're completely transparent. We always have been that way with him. So and he trusts us. So what I explained to him is that when we get to that point, one thing that's going to negatively impact him, that's great for us, that's really bad for him, is that we didn't used to get to keep interest on the money held in the general fund, but we do now. So that amount right there is risk-free. So we're definitely going to make above that in order to account for the risk that's going to be on this project. And so I reached out to the fella at the state who is in charge of investing on a daily basis, the money in the general fund. Ryan would have loved it. It was such a fun conversation. I could have talked to him all day. So he told me about, he's only been here for a year. He talked to me about what he inherited when he came in, what his strategies are, where he expects us to be next year, so that I can try, and that's how I came up with 7%. But using that information, I was communicating with the tenant. We're going to be looking at that. We're going to be looking at what the current market conditions are. So just understand that we don't know today what it is, but we will in the future. And of course, we're going to show him every step, just the same way that we'll show all of you. All right, the next line that I want to bring to your attention is the green line. That is the gain on disposal of direct finance lease. That's that non-sale sale. So the sale that hasn't happened yet, but the sale that they say that we have to show. So you see that that's a $2.7 million increase to our net income. And then the last line is the blue line. That's our change in net assets. The $4 million is the net income that you can see if you open up our financial statements today. The estimated fiscal year 23, if we do everything that's in the operating budget, if we do everything that's in the capital improvement budget that we're going to go into in just a few minutes, we would project our net income for fiscal year 23 to be $466,242. And then for fiscal year 24, we would expect it to be $233,634. And so you would say, well, why is it going down between 23 and 24? And the reason why it always will do that, the reason why it's going down is because of the capital improvement budget and the associated depreciation. Because once you start doing these $1 million projects, then you have to start depreciating them. So you're going to see that come through as an expense, which is going to reduce your income. So that's page 1. Does anybody have any questions before we move on to page 2?
Yeah. One would then look at this and say that your produce market rent of $1,576,000 plus the produce market least interest revenue, if you added those up, one would think that's your rental income.
But you're being
But-
logical.
But it's not.
That is correct.
So is
Your
not,
thinking
is that,
logical.
so is not that a number that should be of interest to you all as the working?
We do care.
Yeah,
And
And
then
us as the board to know whether our rents are going up, our rents are going down, or not, because expenses go up all the time. So you want your rents to go up, if not, you'll be out of business.
yeah.
Totally agree with you. Totally agree with you. So on page 2, the top of the page, I tried to figure out some sort of metric to break down these financial statements, because to me, you're not learning anything. But as you just mentioned, you're not learning anything at that financial statement about what decisions are management making. And so what I did was I just opened up the financial statements for 22, and that's why you see that $4 million under GAAP net income. And then for fiscal year 21, you see that we had $27,000 in net income. And that's why I crack up when I see the $4 million, because it's just so ridiculous to see that number. But 21 was also weird too. So if you think back to 21, what we did during that year is we had $165,000 of a pension adjustment that comes from the state. It's not real. We will never pay it. This is a number that is calculated by an actuary, and then it's divided up by proportionate share for each state agency. Each state agency puts that number on their financial statements, and then it's going to hit your P&L depending on what the liability number is. And then once we roll up all of the financial statements together for the whole state, and that they get that final comprehensive financial statement, they're going to see that number that the actuary came. So it's not real. So we, in the financial statements last year, we showed a whole schedule to show this is what it would have been without that pension adjustment, because it's not real. The other thing that we did last year was we had a deficit for service expense reimbursement for the produce market and for the Maryland Market Center. And to help them through COVID-19, we picked that up for them last year. So in order for us to compare apples to apples, in the next line, you can see that fiscal year 21 has gone up to $312,000. So that's what it would have been. That's if you really want to evaluate how well did we manage our resources, that's the number. And then for fiscal year 22, if you take out the GASB 87, I want to say nonsense, but that seems not the right word. But you take out the GASB 87 information, and then you take out the 2.7 non-sale sale, then you come up with $690,000. So when you look at that number, that looks great. But when I'm looking at it, I would say, well, why did it go up so much? And were you expecting it to go up so much? And the answer is yes. And the reason that we were expecting it to go up so much is because one of the ground leases is kicked in. And it's through this number here, this differential, that's where we're expecting to be able to borrow to do the produce market expansion. So this was critical. We needed to see this in order to know going forward that we'd be able to go out and get financing for whatever we need to finish the produce market after we get the funding from the state and after whatever we get from the county. So this is what we were hoping to see, and it was what we saw. Then underneath that, you see this is the statement of activities, the net income statement, directly from the financial statements. And what I really wanted to highlight was just how many different lines of operating revenue we have now. We used to be so boring. It used to just say rental revenue and other revenue, and now we have lease interest revenue, direct finance rent revenue. Direct finance is so many different things now, instead of it just being, here's your lease, this is what your lease says you're going to pay us, that's your rental revenue. That doesn't keep the same. Then underneath of that, you're going to see the operating expenses for fiscal year 22, and we're going to get into that in a little more depth when we get to the next page. But this, the net operating income, which is what we used to look at. We used to look at that number because it meant something to us. It used to tell us, were we making good decisions? But now we can't even look at that number to say, are we making good decisions? So what we have to do is look at that $690,000 to see if we're doing well. And when we had this meeting last year, we went through the same analysis. We were projecting net income of $210,000. And so you would say, okay, well, it came up to 700. Why are we so far off? Well, it's a couple of things. Number one, we'll get into this when we're doing the budget, but number one, we are not like some state agencies. I mean, agency most, at least anyone who's appropriated. If you get appropriated money, you're gonna spend that money. We're not appropriated. We have to budget for worst case scenario, and then we exercise cost control. So we do things very, very different. So when we see a big change like this, we recognize it's because we're budgeting to make sure that we can fulfill all of our obligations, and it's also because we're exercising strong control. So the numbers really are positive, and I wish that they weren't all muddied up with this Gatsby 87, but we really did have a very good year last year, and it's really setting us up for success to go into the produce market expansion project. So does anybody have any questions on that page? Alrighty. Oh, aren't people are. Here we go. Okay, the next page, this is when we're diving into the operating budget. And please know that in your FedEx packet, any detail that you want to look at is there. So if you want to dive into anything, go right, it's there, send questions afterward. I love talking this, I'm passionate about it. I love talking about this. So anything that comes up after this, please reach out. But this is just the summary to try to give everybody the flavor of what's going on. So when we get together, and this is definitely a team effort, we all get together and we work on this. We have objectives in mind as we're creating the budget. Number one, for those of you that have been around for a while, there are times when the state does come in and they sweep cash, and we don't even know it's happening. We will be reconciling the bank account, and we'll go, oh, it's clearly somebody has put this, and then oh, that they swept our cash. And that this has happened at least 5 times that I'm aware of. So what we have to do is we have to protect ourselves should that ever come up again. And that way we make sure that we protect the cash balance because we're demonstrating our need for our funds. The other thing that we have to do is in the leases that everybody signs, we are contractually obligated to provide services. And we have to make sure that we budget enough for those services. And in fact, this just came up. We do share the budgets with the tenants so that they have an opportunity to give feedback. And so one of the things that they reached out about was asking about exterminating services. And why are we budgeting so much for exterminating services? And so the answer I had to give them was, we have a contract. We know exactly what we're going to pay. But what if they go out of business? What if then we have to go out for bid? Then we don't have enough money in it, because you know, when we got that contract, it was way cheaper then than it is today. If we had to go out and get it. So we have to budget for worst case scenarios so that we can continue to offer these services that we're contractually obligated to do. But are we trying to spend more money? Of course not. Everyone in here that works with me knows that I'm very stingy. I don't want people to spend money.
You calculate or you anticipate a market rate for that services, even though we're paying a below market rate, what you're saying.
What we try to do is to build enough cushion in there that should something happen, we were ready.
So the actual contract for the exterminator was X,
Yes.
but in reality, we should have been paying X plus 20%.
Oh, for sure.
Okay.
Okay, and so then another thing that we do in addition to those 2 items is we evaluate all of our facilities. We look to see what capital improvements do we need to do and what capital improvements do we want to do. And this is usually in the budget process where people aren't happy with me, because usually I say, nope, that's all right, that's gotta go, here I'm looking at you. And it's different because everybody got everything that they wanted. There was nothing that we had to cut out. So that was wonderful. That was absolutely wonderful. And then the last thing that we do when we're doing our budgets is what I mentioned earlier to you, is that because we're not appropriated, we're not looking at a line item and saying, oh, we have $10,000 to spend. Hurry up, it's June, spend all 10,000. We're looking to control the cost, keep the cost low for the tenants, keep the cost low for us. Okay, so when we look at the numbers, when I look at fiscal year 22 and the total expenditure, which is called 3.5 million. And then I look at what we're budgeting for fiscal year 23. The first thing I would say is, why That's so much lower in 2022 versus what you're asking for in 2023, and we really have good reasons. The first thing to know is that when we did the budget for 2022, we budgeted for 4.1 million. So we budgeted 4.1 million, but we came in at 3.5 million. I would love to tell you it's because we're really good at controlling costs, but that is not the reason. They're part of this. But for one thing, which I'm sure a lot of businesses are dealing with right now, unless you're in the tech industry, because it seems like the tech industry is cutting jobs constantly. But in our industry, where we have CDLs who they can write their own ticket, whatever they want. But in our industry, we are struggling with hiring, we are struggling with retention. And the example that I will use, and this is not real, but the example that I will use is, let's say we need 5 maintenance workers to do the work that we need to do, but we only have 3 maintenance workers to do that work. It is way cheaper to work these 3 guys to death and overtime than it is to pay for 5 guys in regular time plus benefits. So you got 2 extra state benefits in there. Is that sustainable? Absolutely not, and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing the turnover. When I do payroll now, I'm like, okay, who's that? Oh, okay. She does it too, but she has the same experience. We thankfully have Carrie and Martin, because between the 2 of them, it's probably 50 years of experience. But when you look at the employees, the most is a year. We've also had an employee who's been out since February on workers' comp, which has affected us significantly. So while the number looks great and we really saved a lot of money from a salaries perspective, it's terrible. We want to spend that money. We want to have a full staff. We want the people to come to work and be happy when they're here, instead of working 6 days a week, putting it, I mean, when I just recently did a payroll, my jaw dropped when I saw how much time one particular employee had worked, because it's not sustainable. It's great from a number, but not from reality, because then what do we have? We have turnover, and we have all new people that we need to train, and we've got to provide these services. So it's not like we can just say, we're not going to do trash today. Too bad, we'll get you tomorrow. We can't do that. So the number is lower, but it's lower only because we're not fully staffed. And believe me, we're trying. The other thing that definitely affects the actual versus what we're budgeting is that we have a very mild winter. And when we have a very mild winter, our snow removal costs are very low. And if you just heard, that's scary, because he's really happy when we have a very mild winter. Back in 2008, when we had that snowmageddon, we spent $150,000 just at the produce market on snow removal. So, I mean, imagine $150,000 being added to this number, because it certainly could. We are always susceptible to one snowstorm, $150,000 to our budget. So that's another reason why actual is always going to be lower, because we're budgeting for the snow, but none of the snow actually materialized last year. And another item, and this is just affects me personally, so I'll use myself as an example. One of the things that we've been doing for several years during COVID, we were deferring IT costs. We were deferring everyone getting a laptop or a desktop, because we have a whole system set up for when have they run their useful life. So people's names come up, and then you get to get your new laptop or your new desktop. And it happened to me. And so they say, Angela, it's your turn. And I say, no, thank you. I am good. My laptop works just fine. I don't need that. It's a waste of money. Then I'll be down for a period of time. That doesn't work for me. I'm good. And so that's what's happening is I'm seeing in the budget, we have 4 computers that we need to buy. And then at the end of the year, we did buy 1. And so we're budgeting for these things, but we're not actually spending the money for these IT purchases. And then the other thing that happened this year, and I know Gary knows this is an anomaly as well, is we have a maintenance fleet of vehicles. We take the trash out ourselves. We have our own trucks. We have packers. They take it to the landfill. That's what our maintenance guys do. Part of what our maintenance guys do. These trucks can need repairs that cost $20,000 on one invoice. So I'll get that invoice number. I didn't get any of those invoices. I don't know how. I don't know if we're doing great maintenance. It's Martin. So we just got really lucky that we didn't have any of those big expenses, because we can have that not just on 1 vehicle, but on 2 vehicles, on 3 vehicles. It just happens that way. So we just got lucky. And then when we come back up and we're looking at the 2022 to the 2023, We are going to continue with our 23 positions. We had dropped 2 positions previously. We had stopped taking after's crack for them, so we had dropped 2 positions. We're going to still have 23 authorized positions, but we have vacancies in each department, except for admin. And then if you compare 23 total to 24 total, there's a 6% change, which is better than inflation right now. So I think when I look at that metric, I'm okay with that increase. But then I like to dive in and see where are the actual changes coming. So on the salaries column, if you go over to the right, you're going to see there's a 9.1% change, but it's not just salaries that are affecting this number. There's a lot of different line items that fall under salaries. And one of them is injured workers insurance fund. And the injured workers insurance fund for us, it seems that it's self-funded in the same way that the insurance is self-funded. So what happens is the state will get a listing of all of the payouts for each agency. And then in October, they come and they take your money and they just determine how much is your agency responsible for to reimburse the fund based on how much money came out of it. And I just told you we've had a worker out since February. So we're going to get slammed next year. So included in this 9.1% is a big increase for workers' comp so that we can cover that cost when it comes through. Now, also in there, in fiscal year 23, Governor Hogan issued a 4.5% COLA increase on November 1st, which is included in that number. But also included in that number is something that we just do every year, is a 2% COLA increase on January 1st, 2023. Is that going to happen? Probably not, but it's just something that we do. We only give increases when the rest of the state is authorized to have an increase. So just because it's in our budget doesn't mean we do it. We wait and we find out if the rest of the state can get it. Like I said, is it going to happen? Probably not. But if it does happen, I certainly want to be able to offer it to our employees because of what we're dealing with employee retention.
In fact, we can't give because they won't process it.
Yeah, we have to.
Yeah, the state will, you know, unless the state has authorized the increase, we don't get any. Yeah.
So most state agencies have full access to this personnel system, so they can go in and they can make changes on it, but like a step child, that we only get limited access to this system. So for us to get raises, it has to be in a spreadsheet sent to the state and then the state has to. So it's not like we can even just do it ourselves. It has to go through the employees of the state. Okay, and then in fiscal year 24, I did what I do every single year. I did a 4% merit increase on July 1st, 2023. Will it happen? No idea, but we wanted to be there in case it does happen. And then I did the 2% COLA, which is the same thing that I do every year. And then down under fuel and utilities, you'll see there's a 5.3% increase from the prior year. And this is because of the budget instructions that we were given by the state. Electricity rates and natural gas rates are higher. I mean, speaking personally, my kilowatts per hour rate at my house went up 300%. So that I've seen it myself because I really do rate and I don't. And then over at the produce market, all of our electricity is procured through DPS because they pull all the resources and they get the best. We have one building in the produce market that we did an electrical upgrade on one section of the building. And when we did that electrical upgrade, we got permission from DGS to use this particular vendor to get our electricity supply. So it's the only one that we control. And when we did that contract, it came up for renewal. I don't know why, I just got really lucky. Believe me, there was nothing involved in this, just luck. I locked this in through the year 2029 at a historically low rate. So all of the tenants, I mean, we don't pay for it, the tenants pay for it. We have sub meters installed, they're ready each month, they get billed for their electricity based on their actual usage. But what's funny is that we have a tenant who operates in the section with the sub meters. He also has space in another area of the market. He has his own contract with the same company that we have. So he called me within the last 6 months and he was like upset with me saying, why is my electric bill so high on my other units and it's so low over in the units that I have with you guys? And I said, because you're in a long-term contract to 2029 and they have to honor that super low rate. It's like 3 cents. It's It's like my home is 17 cents now, so, we're seeing that, we're seeing the electricity go up, so we had to increase the budget. And then the last, item that I, want to speak about specifically is in contractual services. That's going up by 6.8%, and that is directly related to our increased IT costs. We are having increased IT costs for any of the state people in the room. We have had a cyber audit, we've had a cyber assessment, we've had 2 cyber surveys, and we had 1 master planning we have to do every February. So we are getting hit with a tremendous amount of cybersecurity costs. I mean, it was $22,000 that needed to go into fiscal year 24 that we never needed to do before, but it's for our cybersecurity in order for us to be able to get through these audits that we're going through with the state. So this is being pushed down on us. We don't have an option here. We have to do these things. In addition, we have the live streaming costs. Again, it's a statute that's telling us we have to do these things that we never had to do before. This is very expensive. We need to get better internet into this facility here. We would go from paying $250 a month for internet to $1,500 a month for internet because we need a T1 line in order to sustain that. Again, it's the statute. It's not what we need before, it's what we need now because of the statute. So this is all solely IT costs that are on. So when we're looking at our challenges for the coming years, highest is going to be hiring, and it's going to be our employee retention, and we do everything we can for that. It's also going to be the increased cyber cost that we just talked about in the live streaming. But the anticipated successes are the ones that I'm always most excited about. So we've got the produce market expansion on the horizon. As Don said, we're going to be going out for bid on that soon, next year. We also have the existing facility that we're working on the expansion for that one. Now, when we look at our capital improvement budget, we spend money, significant amount of money on capital improvements going back into the market. There's really not a return on that because it's already incorporated in the rent that we collect from our tenants. However, when we spend money for expanding a facility like that, we're going to make money on that money that we're spending, and it's my favorite. So that's anytime we get the opportunity to spend money to make money, we're going to take that opportunity. So that's what's happening with that facility. So we're going to bring that back. We'll be seeing that information soon. And then the tenants and us as well, we're very excited about finally having the interior be dry at the Maryland Market Center because we put $4 million into that. So we have these beautiful office spaces that are just completely water. So we're very excited to be able to have that go back to looking like soon. So that's the operating budget. Anybody have any questions on the operating? All right, now we're going to go to the capital improvement. This form is set up in the same way. You're going to see the actual fiscal year 22 on the left. In the middle is 23, which is the year we're in now, and 24 is the year that will start on July 1st, 2020. When I look at actual, the thing that jumps out to me would be, I don't see any big produce market expenditure, and there's a great reason for that. We were ready to go out for bid on multiple produce market contracts to do improvements down there. Then the produce market expansion came. As an example, we were going to go out for bird netting. Bird netting is something we have an exposed dock. Bird netting goes on the canopy to prevent the birds from nesting and then going on the product. If we're enclosing the dock, we don't need netting because the birds won't be in there. So all we would have done is gone out for bid, paid the money, and then not needed it or ripped it out because then it's in the way. So all of the projects at the produce market are on hold, and until we know exactly what we're doing down there, and then we'll plan accordingly. At the Maryland Market Center, we did not do any major projects on that facility at all, and the reason is because we were budgeting to do the $1.7 million roof, but because of supply chain constraints, it didn't get started until after July. So the expenses is going to show their expense. We're doing it right now. So you're going to see those expenses next year. We were expecting them to be in last year's budget. We went out for bid for it to be that way. but we weren't able to get it done because of the supply chain issue. So the main project that we did do, it's in the Maryland Market Center site area, is if we go back to 2015, when it was just land back there, we sold one lot, and then we have ground leases for the 2 other lots, and there's site work that went into that. And as the project has gone on, we have an agreement for this, that there was an additional $1 million of site work that needed to be done. And the Food Center Authority was responsible for paying their proportionate share on that. We talked about this at the board meeting last year, the board approved that amount. So we were budgeting last year for worst case scenario, so we budgeted 1 million. Our amount was $320,000. So we have paid our portion of that site development cost. Now that dovetails very nicely into the very first line in the fiscal year 23 column. For that site, there is a developer's agreement with the county, with Howard County, and there are 2 names as the developers on that agreement. One is the Maryland Food Center Authority, and one is a contractor that has absolutely nothing to do with this project. And we have been trying for a year to get that developer's name off of the contract, off of the agreement with the county. And so it would just be us on that agreement. One of the issues that we've been having is that we needed to get a bond. We have been unable to do that as a result of not having our financial statements, because we wanted to see that and then we don't have it. Right, so because we're trying to move forward, then we talked to the county to say, so we can't get a bond. What can we do? What can we do in lieu of a bond? And so they said, well, from the drawings that we have, you still have $1.2 million of work that needs to be done there. So worst case scenario is you guys give us $1.2 million. We will hold it, and when the project is done, then we will give the money back to you. The good news is that some of that work is already done. I just told you, we just did some of that work. So what's happening right now is that the other contractor's architect has the as-bills, which includes the work that we've done that the county doesn't even know about. And they are working with the county to convince them to lower that amount, because that's not the amount that needs to be completed right now. So again, when I do these budgets, I budget worst case scenario. This is absolute worst case scenario that they would hold, but we would get it back. And every party that's back there has a vested interest in getting this done as quickly as possible. And you can probably speak to this more. It's not a lot of work that needs to be done, correct?
Sidewalks, a couple of items that ARCO is building. The building back here will focus on once the building is all done, because there's a real demand for the owner to be able to use the building. And the county inspector has agreed, if we provide him with the as-built, he'll go out and inspect the work that was done and either require that it be fixed if there's a flaw in it, or they'll accept it and then they'll reduce the amount of money that we have to post with the county. The problem that we were running into is that with this private developer that was on the developer's agreement, they had a bond, and the county requests that if we get a bond, we remove them. The bond has to go all the way back to the beginning of the project, and we would have to bond work that they've already done. And so if the county accepts it, then we can post the money that's for the rest of the improvements. And we could not get a bond company to issue a bond prior to when we were going to be on the developers agreement.
We certainly tried.
Yeah. And it's been, and the developer who's on the bond has been complaining that they're on the bond, but they were the ones that didn't provide us with the as-bills. So we've recently had another meeting with them, and they've agreed to expedite these as-bills so that we can give them to the county. The county can then determine the value of the improvements that need to be done, and then we can post money that's more reasonable than 1.7, because there's been a lot of work that's already been done. And so that's where we're at.
And so then the next line item on here is for the expansion that we talked about at the beginning of the presentation. And this was approved by the board last year, so it just got pushed forward into this year. And then the next line is for renovation vacant units. This was the amount that was $4.5 million going back to 2018, I believe. This is the amount that the board approved for the Maryland Market Center renovation. This is the amount that remains. And Gary is hopeful to be able to go out and do windows this year on the dock. The last line that's highlighted is the roof. That roof was approved by the board last year, but because of supply chain issues, we weren't able to get it done in the last fiscal year. So that's why you're seeing it in this fiscal year. And this 1.79, that is the revised amount. When the board originally approved it, I think it was approved at 1.6 million. But when the bids came back, they've gone up with inflation change. And so then the board revised it. So this is the revised amount. Then when we look over into fiscal year 24, we know that we need to seal the asphalt at the produce market. Obviously, none of the areas where the concrete is, and it may even have to be in phases depending on what's happening with the produce market expansion. But we do know that it needs to be sealed. We just need to figure out what's the best way for us to get that project done with the produce market. And then the final two that they're related, the final two that are highlighted, we presented last year to the board. These are at the Maryland Market Center. These were issues that were identified in the tenant survey. And as I mentioned before, we have these canopies above the open dock. And so the tenants have requested that they be sandblasted and painted and the roof be replaced. That could not be done until the roof is done. So we had to push it from the year that it was in and we pushed it back. So you've already approved the number, we're just pushing it back. And so that in total is our capital improvement budget, or at least the highlights of it. Does anybody have any questions?
Again, I'm trying to remember that we had a conversation with an auditor at one point. We were cited on the contracts as we were adding on. As you keep referring to these, do we have to have a motion? Do we have to approve that we're spending more, spending less, or the year that we're moving it from? Does that require any board approval?
But what would happen is when we get to a contract that's more than $500,000, then we do need to get board approval.
Okay, because you've got a couple, kind of like you just mentioned, the roof replacement and
We got that one already.
okay, then it went up.
We
And
got
then
that.
you've got two $500,000 ones in it for, which I'm sure you'll bring to us later. But okay, I just want to make sure we're staying in compliance.
And those will probably be bid together. The two $500,000 projects, I think that they'll be bid together.
As long as we're trying to stay in compliance.
Absolutely.
Maybe we cited once, I don't want to see it again.
No, I'm definitely with you, Steve.
Great.
Definitely with you. Okay, so then we'll move on to the next page. Oh, I do like to always figure out, are we being equitable? Are we spending money in both markets the way that we should be spending money in both markets? And so when you compare the food center, the produce market, and the Maryland Market Center, it sure sticks out like a sore thumb that it's only 8% at the produce market. But check back next year when this number is like 92%, because we're doing the produce market expansion at that point. I also do like to keep a running total on how much we have spent over, and it says 13 because it just tells you how many years we've added since we've been doing this. But over the last 13 years, we've spent $6.6 million at the produce market in capital improvements, and we spent $7 million at the Maryland Market Center. So it's almost 50-50 split. When we do the produce market renovation, I'm really like asterisk for a little bit, but I think it's really going to start to skew the numbers. And then finally, the last thing that I have on the presentation is if we do everything that's in, it's on the last page here. Mine's different. If we do everything that we just talked about on the operating, if we do everything that we just talked about on the capital improvement budget, this is our ending cash balance in 23, and this is our ending cash balance in 24. Please keep in mind that I do not include in any way in this number the $1.2 million that we're assuming the county is holding for us. So that's not in this because I need to know. I need to get that money's gone in my mind. We're gonna get back, but it's gone. So even with that money being gone, we're still above $2.5 million in the bank. Very confident that number. And so that is the conclusion of the presentation. I just took you on a walk down the Maryland Food Center. So if anybody has any questions that come up After we leave here, please feel free to reach out.
Okay.
Love to talk.
Well, we're gonna kind of take at this, there's three motions that need to be made, to accept or reject. The first is, we need someone to make a motion to approve the fiscal 22 audited financial statements. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? That'll be the appropriate time for the questions on the, approval of the fiscal year 22 audit. Questions? Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. All those in favor of accepting, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries. Second motion to approve the revised fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 24 capital improvement budgets in total. And do I see a motion for that, please? Do I see a second? Second, thank you very much. Any discussion on these capital improvement budgets for 23 and 24? You must have done a very nice job. We're not getting any questions here. Okay, we'll go, seeing no more discussion, we'll go to a vote. We'll vote on the motion. All those in favor of accepting the revised fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 24 capital improvement budgets in total. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any oppositions? Motion carries. The last motion, motion to approve the fiscal year 23 operating budget and the fiscal year 24 operating budget in total. Included in these budgets is a 4.5% COLA increase given to all state employees by the governor on November 1, 22, and a 2% COLA on January 1, 23 for the executive director, and a 4% merit and a 2% COLA increase in fiscal year 24. The fiscal year 23 COLA on January 1, 23 and fiscal year 24 increases will only be given if the state of Maryland authorizes increases for all state agencies. Do I hear a motion for that? Next year we need to put it on.
Yeah.
We have a motion, do we have a second, please?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussions, any questions? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor of the motion, I'm not gonna read it again, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Seeing none, the motion carries. Thank you very much. Excellent, as you can see with no comments, questions,
No.
it's an excellent presentation, and we thank you.
you.
We appreciate your again. I actually enjoy your commentary that goes with it.
Yeah.
So it's a very dry subject, but you make it, it's a very dry subject, but you make it very interesting. So thank you, and Don will probably agree with me, we are very lucky to have you on board with us to explain Don's entire team.
Yes.
We are very lucky to have this team in place, makes our job that much easier. So we thank you, your team, please tell them, I say, and I think we speak to the board, thank them for all their hard work throughout the year and the years, and we need to work on the turnovers.
Yeah.
Somehow to make your jobs easier, and if you have a recommendation on what we can do for that, please bring it to us and we will see what we can do to help out. We support you.
Thank you.
The last subject we're going to talk about is the revenue expense affecting private tenants and others of the fire project. Who's going to talk about those statements?
I would love to. Because this one that we're looking at this year is really. Sorry.
All right, let's see.
They're in your the last 2 pages.
Well, it looks like it's still doing okay.
Okay, so this particular statement that you're looking in front of you is the most meaningful one that we do all year. So that's why we're going to look at that today. The produce market and the Maryland Market Center both have something that's called the Statement of Revenue and Expenses. Internally, we call it an R&D. Don't ask me why, that's just what we do. So what we look at on June 30th, each fiscal year, we look to see how much have we collected in entrance fees, how much have we collected on their second line of their rent invoice for something called service expense reimbursement, and how much have we spent? Because if we collected too much, we give them a refund. If we haven't collected enough, we bill them for the difference. If we don't collect enough, We bill it back to them over a long period of time. Each year, if you're looking at the produce market, the fiscal year 22 line shows you there's $149,000 that remains owed in order for the account to be at zero. So over a 10-month period of time, they are repaying us the $149,000. If you turn the page to the Maryland Market Center, to the second line, we owe them $39,000. That refund was given immediately in 1 month. So that's how we do it. We try to make it as easy as we can on the tenants. If we owe them the money, we want to give it back as soon as we possibly can. But keep in mind, when we do these expenses, there's no upcharge on anything. We're not making money on anything. What we pay is exactly what the tenants pay, and that's demonstrated here in these statements. So if I show this to you again for the July or any other month besides June, it does give you an indication of where we are at that exact moment. If it hasn't been February or March yet, we still could have a massive snowstorm that's gonna blow that out. So what I also will tell you is that the fiscal year 22 number for produce being $149,000, it affected me. And so what I did, because I don't want that to happen to our, what I did was starting September 1st on their monthly rent invoice, we increased their service expense, I believe by $80 per unit per month. And the expectation is then at the end of June, as long as nothing crazy happens, we will then be at a zero or owe them money like we did in the Maryland Market Center. And so that's already happened. And so they've been billed September, October, November, December at the higher rate. So we did react. I did react. I did not like that number. So I did.
When we look at prior year 21, this is the number that you are referring to that we ate.
That is
The
exactly right.
75,000 and 27,000.
Exactly.
We ate that as a concession because of COVID.
Thank you, Steve. Yes, exactly. We pay attention.
And try.
It's
We need a motion.
dramatic difference.
It all is, at the pro, well, each market is completely separate.
Right.
So don't ever compare the two because they are very, very different. But the biggest change in the produce market is going to be at the top line.
Yeah.
Take a look at entrance fees. In fiscal year 21, they had $379,000 come through the gate,
Gotcha.
and then 336 come through. So it has to be made up in the service expense reimbursement since it went down in the gate. Now, when we talk about it, don't know. We're going to find out. We're going to see, but because we did see it happen from time to time with that middle gate being open. Has anybody been cheating? Coming through, not paying their fees, so it's gonna show, the numbers are gonna show, whether that was not. So
Yeah.
it's a priority, definitely getting that out, especially.
Now, tying all this back, we'll move to accept it in a moment. But one of your biggest expenses, in the fiscal budget, in the fiscal year 2024, as you look at 23, is to go from the actual 22,307,000 salaries, wages, and benefits, you're going to 2794, 2,794. That's going to see if we can fill those positions, and after the increases, that's going to make a huge impact on their expenses.
It can, so
It should if we can fully staff.
it can, it's less money now with having the fewer people doing it. From a benefits perspective, so it should, but at the same time, there are other areas below that may come down. The entrance fees may go up. There's so many different parts that go into that puzzle that just because one changes doesn't mean the bottom line is gonna
So
go down.
it's just pretty dramatic. I mean, again, you're looking at a 9.1% increase when you're
Right.
on that, just on one line item.
Right, but that includes admin. That includes
Okay.
us as well. So if we're just
Okay.
looking at the produce market and we're just looking at the Maryland Market Center, the produce market and the Maryland Market Center aren't eating that huge IWIF charge that I talked about. That's all on admin. None of that is on produce market or the Maryland Market Center.
Comp falls, oh, it's a person out of this department, not out of.
No, it's a person out of that department, but we do not pass that cost on to the tenant administration.
That's why.
It would be very difficult to, I totally agree with you. I completely agree with you. But it would be very difficult to pass that cost on and have the tenants, not, I don't wanna say revolt.
No, I mean, the tenants have,
But
the
the
tenant-
county has to be paid for where it happened.
yeah, but the tenants have the right under their lease to abandon certain services that we're providing them and have us go out and procure them in the open market. For example, trash removal, they could put it out for bid and try and get it done. The problem with that, or even the guard situation, is that when we dismantle our ability to do that, because they've gone outside, the outside market can then hold them hostage. And with us, at least it's all transparent, so they see it.
They're also,
So we try not to, I mean, because our employees are state employees, the benefit that the state employees get is higher than what the benefits that the public sector is paying. And so we have to be careful that we don't get it to a point where we can't afford, with the benefits and everything else, to be able to do the services that we provide. That all those services have to be procured outside. And then we would have to deal with the fact that if a vendor gets for example, the guard business, and then the very next year wants to raise the rate, we would be forced to try and put it out for bid again. And the tenants like the fact that we don't mark up our costs, and we try to keep it stable.
in addition to that, the payroll for that employee that has been out since February has all been paid by the tenants.
Okay,
And all has been paid by the tenants. This is an assessment from the state for them to try to replenish their insurance fund.
You
So
didn't explain.
It's all completely,
I thought it was direct, I thought that money was a direct charge to our situation.
no, their weekly payroll goes out the door and it gets allocated.
Okay, we need a motion to accept the statement of revenue and expenses. Do I, anybody,
I'll move to accept the statement of revenues and expenses.
we have a second? Okay, we got ahead of ourselves and decided, I'm sorry, on any questions. Questions are now open on this motion. Anyone has?
Does Steve have any questions?
Sorry, got too excited. All those in favor of accepting the statement of revenue and expenses, say aye. Any opposition? No, it passes. Thank you. The last item on our agenda is the schedule of meetings for calendar year 2023. Look at it March 16th, March 21st, September 21, November 15th. I hopefully will be here on the 16th. I got 2 grandchildren to do that in 2 different states. So my wife tells me to be, I'll be at one of them. I would imagine.
Yeah, please keep in mind, those are tentatives.
Yeah, they are tentatives.
Let's, little, I know we're going off the agenda. Does anybody have anything they want to bring up, talk about, discuss? Maybe need anything to add? Okay, I just want to wish everyone, thank you all for coming. I want to wish everybody happy holiday season. Did I miss something?
Yeah, my bad. Motion to adjourn.
I'm not there yet.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I just wanted to wish everybody a happy holiday season. We begin the month of December, and wishing everybody a prosperous and healthy new year as well. Now, can I see a motion to adjourn, please? Does anyone have a motion to adjourn?
So.
Any seconds? Second. Thank you. All in favor of adjourning? Any opposition to anybody wanting to stay longer? Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lunch.
That's the least I've said was any meetings ever.
You have a good day.
Yeah, it was comfortable just